Hello and welcome to this Dawn Busters Taste Challenge. Although it's questionable if dawn is going to arrive, it's very foggy and the days are getting shorter here, heading toward December 21st. But anyhow, I have two Xicaru mezcals. This is Xicaru Silver. They're both espadin mezcals made from the espadin agave plant, a common agave for mezcal. This is the unaged, so they just distill it and they don't age it, all right, at all. So it's totally clear. I hear you down there, crybaby, the kitten. And this is Xicaru Reposado. It's aged between 2 and 4 months, so about 3 months aged in oak. There, it finally focused. One shows an active jaguar, and other one shows a resting jaguar. Get it rested. What do you want? Come here. Come on, come on. I know you want to get up here so you can let me do this challenge without too much disruption, okay? You can purr. Okay, so let's see what happens. Sort of cross styling a little bit, a rested versus a silver, but let's see if it makes a difference. I don't think it's going to make too much difference because I don't think these are very different from one another, aging or no aging, but we're going to find out. They're not smoky. Have a wooden cap and a rubber stopper, neoprene or synthetic rubber. I'd say artificial rubber. I guess it's not made from, the rubber, latex, the rubber tree. It's made by DuPont. So there's Xicaru Silver. Xicaru Silver you can find at maybe $28. Don't walk on the keyboard. The rested, the Reposado run about $30. So they're about $2. They're about $2 difference. $2 difference, maybe $3, not too much. I found them both at Total Wine and More. I've never seen this brand in my town, but then my town doesn't really get mezcal. The only mezcal I ever found here that I bought was Sombra. And like I said, Mathern's has a very expensive one. It's like $300 a bottle. I'm not doing that. Beautiful ceramic bottle. All right, so they're both clear. The aging doesn't add any tint to it that I can detect. That's the thing about this kitten. Let me up, then get down. Once I get up, get down. Get up, get down. She wanted to go on the back screened-in porch, but then she didn't want to go. So I said, well, then don't go. I closed the screen door. I said, I thought you might want to look outside. You like to look outside, but I've never let her out since I brought her in the house. She never seems to want to go out. Okay, I got them well mixed. I'll show you the website for what that's worth. It's not a fancy website. It's kind of basic. This is an independent company. Money for all the, active graphics, the fancy stuff. Xicaru Silver. There's the founder, Fernando Santabanez. He runs the show. There's the agave plants out in the desert. There they are chopping. Throwing the the agaves in the conical pit. Can't barely see that. And then we have the Reposado, age 2 to 4 months. So it might vary, sometimes 2 months, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. Probably they age it for taste whenever they feel it's right. When they find out it's correct, they'll pull it. They told me on the Jack Daniels tour they age there with taste, not age. In other words, they age it when they feel it's ready, they pull it. So it could vary, but they say generally it's 4 years. But it's not an official age statement. It typically is 4 years. give or take a couple of months. Okay. And sometimes they say it doesn't come out right and they don't use the barrel. Well, they don't use it for Jack Daniels. They probably use it in a cheap blended whiskey that they don't even put their name on. It probably won't say Brown-Forman. It'll say like, Tennessee Quality Distillers, some kind of alias name. I noticed those companies will do that for their cheapos. They don't typically dump the stuff, or they might auction it off. And somebody else might use it for a blend. They might auction it to Jacques of Philadelphia, and they'll blend it in with some of their blended whiskeys. But anyway, that's the market. I mean, that's the industry. They told me on the phone at Buffalo Trace that sometimes it really does not come out, and they dump it. Just dump it away, dump it down. I doubt that's a common occurrence. Might happen once every 10 years. Okay, aroma, not much happening here. Neutral, a little agave juice, but mostly neutral. A little smoke, which is indicating to me that it's probably the Reposado, because I remember having a little smokiness, but not much. Joe Cobb says, morning, Ron. Morning to you, Joe. You got a doctor's appointment today? Should be fine, though. Okay, I hope everything's okay. Best wishes on that. I got to look for the smoke, meaning taste for the smoke. I'm not going to look for it with my eyes, but you know what I mean? No, I mean. But I did a review early, like around 3-something a.m. That was for Tuesday. This is going to count for Wednesday because I just don't think I'll have time. I could fit it in Wednesday easily. Well, not as easily. That's why I'm doing it today, because today I'm not going to work today, so I could easily do it now. Wednesday, I could fit it in. Wouldn't be that difficult, but it would be more of a headache. So why do that, when I can just double it up today and get it out the way? All right, taste time. Made me sneeze. Yeah, just agave juice, nectar, whatever the term is for that. Same thing. Bless you, that time of the year. Yeah, but I'll sneeze all during the year, like little things get in my nose and I just sneeze. Okay. She's playing with her ball, her tennis ball, which is a miracle in a way, because you usually prefer to play with loose leaf paper down there or an ink pen. Fascinated by this ink pen. I don't know what she did with the pencil. I got to look for the pencil. I have other ones, but I would like to use the one I have ready to go, sharpened. Quality product here. Sort of basic, not elaborate, no smokiness. Claude might like it, Claude Diamond. You could taste a little, no, I don't know. It's just, I think maybe yeast or something I was going to say, but maybe we could just stick with agave, just basic. It deserves an A, like 9.3. Do I find that all these different mezcal brands are very different from one another? And my answer is no. They usually run around the same price, $28 low end, $35 high end on these regular ones, to my United States prices. And I hope you have the pencil. No, it's carpet. So you could say, well, why even keep buying them? It's going to be the same thing, repetitive. It is. I think you're right. Mezcal is kind of earthy, like agricole rum, kind of. Yeah, it is. Maybe this is it's not yeast. All of that is distilled out, but I get what you're talking about. Yeah, I know. Like with the whiskeys, I'll say it tastes like sugar water, but I know all the sugar turns into alcohol. It's called attenuated, it's fully attenuated. But I still pick it up. I taste it. That's what it tastes like. I don't know really how to describe these things. Maybe it's just not as filtered as most spirits we are used to. I don't know the answer. Even these have a sugariness. I'm not kidding. Even these have an underlying sugar water flavor, and tequila, and rum, and brandy, especially brandy, and definitely whiskey. So, it could be you don't know what you're tasting. Get out of the game. You can't describe it correctly. Okay. Possibly so, but I know what sugar water tastes like, and I know what I'm tasting. Anything off-putting or unpleasant? Not at all. Anything fancy or elaborate? No. They both around a 9.3 out of 10. Excellent, even at this part of the 100-point scale, at this point of the 100-point scale, even most excellent. But still, that's not that hard to find. You can I've randomly bought mezcals. I don't know what this is about. My nose all of a sudden. That's strange. No, I don't feel sick. And no, I haven't gotten a sore throat or anything like that. Just something in the air, I guess. Oh yeah, maybe cat hair. I hope I'm not allergic to that. What? Now you wanted to get up here and now you're down. You want to come back up? Come on. Yeah, you want to play, but I'm busy at the moment. Okay. Yeah, I'll say save the $2 or $3 and just buy the silver because you're not getting. I don't see you getting much advantage on the Reposado. You say, oh no, it's very, very, very fine, and it's a difference. Yeah, it might be very fine, and it's definitely not a difference in my opinion. But you saying yes, I say I don't see it. Don't start with the loose leaf again. Advil cold and sinus helps. Has a pseudoephedrine. A lot of times it's your sinuses being a bit swollen. Yeah, she's getting bigger though. Yeah, she eats her food. I don't give her treats. I don't want her to get into that habit of wanting to have just food for a pleasure or whatever, because I was hearing on CBS News on the hour. It comes on every hour, overnight especially. They used to call it CBS News. What did they used to call it? I think it was called CBS Overnight News, but they just call it on the hour the whole day now. They said 50% of pets, cats and dogs, are obese, overweight, unhealthy. 50%. People give them table food. Not a good idea. I never gave her any table food. They feed them too much. I give her this None Better, Nunn. Nunn. It's from a family called the Nunn family. They have a pet food company, and it's called None Better. It's for kittens and adults, and they say it's really healthy. Or of course, the company is going to say that. But she eats it. She likes it, but she doesn't just want to just be eating it all the time. She eats it because she's hungry, and then she leaves it alone. Yeah, a lot of obese, especially if they're inside pets. Yeah, and apparently getting them spaded makes it more of a problem, kind of, because they're not as active because they don't have that reproduction excitement. I hate to get her spaded because you're kind of like taking away part of her life, but I don't need a bunch of kittens. I did that once before, and I had trouble getting rid of them back in the 80s. On the farm, it's a bit different, but they are outside all day and work off the treats, etc. Yeah, on the farm. My grandfather used to have a hardware store, and my father and them bought it. and they had a lot of feed and seed. They still sell that feed and seed, lots of seeds and a lot of animal feed. Well, rats get in there. They want to eat all the grain. So they always had cats roaming around. They weren't pets. They just let them roam through the warehouse. They had a little hole that they would go in and out, outside and inside. And then they didn't have rats eating the grain. Never had rats eating the grain because the cats will kill them. Yeah, working cats. And we didn't pet them, but they didn't want to come to you anyway. But they weren't like scared of people because they would see people working in the warehouse all day long. But they weren't like this one here, like crying. They want to sit on your lap, asking to be pet. They're just in there, killing, if possible, if necessary. And if the cat would get old and die, they didn't care. My grandpa, he wasn't too sympathetic for cats at all, but he saw them as useful rodent exterminators. Otherwise, I don't think he had any regard for them. I like cats. They're cute. They're interesting animals, just like dogs too. I like dogs. I had a dog, but she was very bad, which is the reason I had her, because somebody said they were going to put her to sleep if I didn't take her because the dog would not listen. I couldn't bear to see that happen. They're very good at pest control, to be fair. Yeah. Natural born killers. That's what they do. That's why they play. Playing is they're practicing killing and fighting. And I think the male cats, they like to fight. I mean, they get hurt a little bit, but they like it. They're out there fighting. They just like to do it, They seem to like it. The fights only last like 3 seconds. They like all that buildup, like howling and crying, that weird sound they make. All that showing off, kind of like pro wrestling. Cat fights are like pro wrestling. There's a lot of buildup, drama, but the actual event isn't so great. I don't watch that. Other people, I used to watch when I was 8 years old, Mid-South Wrestling. I would watch it. I didn't know what it was, I thought it was real. I didn't know. I was 8 years old. I mean, it was just strange. I thought it was different than boxing. I used to like boxing, but I thought pro wrestling was just strange. It wasn't that theatrical then in like 1976. They mostly just wore the trunks and they would battle. And but that was kind of starting. You had a few people wearing a mask. They were like the bad guy stuff. But then in the 80s, it started with all this, like wearing a king's robe, and one's got feathers and everything, and they got all these characters. A sheik from Arabia, but he's really from like New Jersey or something. But that's about the time I lost interest. But anyway, these products are very similar, and I cannot give a win to the Reposado. It seems like it's only aged 2 to 4 months, so around 3 months. But it is given a wood treatment, but I don't see where it makes it too special. Yeah, I don't know. I have one martial arts. I'm a smaller guy, and my mom wanted me to know how to defend myself, but I never got into the fighting for sport or show yet. Well, that's one thing I like about wrestling and boxing, that it's done by weight class, so everybody can compete. If you're a small person like you or myself, we couldn't play professional football unless you're a kicker. And then you ever watch those games that they make a tackle, they like shook up the rest of the game. They're like, really, it's like it hurts them to make a tackle, because that's not really their role. And they're small, and there's no weight classes for football, right? But for wrestling and boxing, there's weight classes. So you could be small or big, doesn't matter. Boxing, prize fighting, small or big. You could be like really small and be featherweight. And they have their whole circuit. They have championships, world championship featherweight, the best in the world in that class. Then you got the heavyweight and welterweight, which is one, below heavyweight, and then light heavyweight, I think it's below welterweight. But anyway, I don't watch it anymore much because it's so corrupted. It's always been corrupted by gambling, people throwing a fight. The famous call, that was no phantom punch. That was no phantom punch from 51 years ago. And everybody knew what he was talking about. And now professional basketball is becoming, and college basketball seems worse than ever, infiltrated with gambling. They're investigating the Los Angeles Lakers. That's a serious situation. And it's sad because they're making a lot of money playing basketball. You're just making a lot of money playing basketball. Why do you need to make more money by doing something illegal involved with the mafia, organized crime, La Cosa Nostra, whatever our thing, a very evil organization. And so you're going to risk all that. And some of these people you're talking to are informants. They're not even really, they're working for the FBI, but they're pretending to be in the mafia. And they're going after the big people. Like you're a bench player in the NBA. You play off the bench. You're second string. You still make good money, you know. They don't care about you. You're nobody. They don't want to. They'll arrest you. They'll prosecute you. They'll get you to talk. They don't care. But they're not going after you. They're going after the big shot people. They want a big conviction, you know. And when they said LA Lakers, I said, uh-oh. And you know whose name they named. And I said, whoa, if this guy is dumb enough to do that. And they're going to watch you, man. They're watching you. And I was reading about that movie Goodfellas. I think of a lot of, okay, let's look at the comments and we're out of here. A lot of people are against guns nowadays, but I don't see any better way to defend yourself. Really, obviously, you hope to never have to do that. But still, I think a lot of it is the Indian mob, from India, at least here in Canada. Yeah. In the United States, you have the Italian mafia, is what you see in the movies, but really a very powerful Jewish mafia goes back. And really, if you watch the movie The Godfather Part 2, it's mainly about a showdown between the Jewish mafia and they kind of keep that kind of alluded to, but they obviously didn't want to make that a forefront of the movie. But even in the original movie, the first movie, there's some part to that is openly about Italian mafia versus the Jewish mafia. And that's kind of like the theme of the movie. And then you have the South Asian organized crime, Irish in Boston and other places. You have Irish organized crime, also in Ireland. You know, the IRA, Irish Republican Army, the freedom fighters. They were really nothing more than an organized crime racket, willing to use their own people as human shields. Now, you can't say that to people. They get upset. But that's what they were willing to do. They didn't care if their people got killed. As long as they promoted they made a lot of money selling drugs. They were affiliated with people like Muammar Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, and it's insanity, you know, and they're like all those Catholics. I mean, the IRA was like a socialist organization, was probably anti-religious in most respects. But it's how they frame themselves, you know, and they dupe people. People are very gullible. And they're making you think, oh, we're for you. No, they're for you. You know, you're getting killed throwing a petrol bomb, and they're making money selling cocaine or heroin. And you're an idiot, and you do it. I mean, look at that Bloody Sunday famous example, 1972. Sort of obvious to any thinking person what was going on there. They were having a march. The march was not intended to be peaceful. I mean, most of the people in the march probably thought so. It was intended to spark a shootout. And the whole goal was obviously to bait British soldiers into firing into the crowd. And so they could get a bunch of quality targets. In other words, a bunch of innocent people, but in that case, probably not really so many innocent people, killed, and then they could say, oh, look how these people are. But that was the whole purpose of it. Anybody can see that. Any thinking person can see that. You have a so-called civil rights march, so-called. Then you start a riot at a checkpoint, and it goes on for hours, and you're trying to bait them into attacking. And most of those soldiers are young, like 18 to 22. It's not going to take a lot to get them to go off on you. And they did it, and it succeeded. And they finally, when you see that commanding officer turn around and button up his jacket, you say, uh-oh. You know, the British, once he buttons up that jacket, you say, uh-oh, somebody's getting clipped now. And so then they went out there and did their thing. And then they say, oh, look what happened. Oh, it's terrible. Well, it's the whole goal of it. That was the whole goal of the march. They were so happy, I'm sure the IRA was like, ooh, whoa. Okay, so 13 people got killed. Big deal. Necessary deaths to get our goals achieved. They never achieved their goals, but they made a lot of money selling drugs, but they never, and running guns to probably Afghanistan or whatever, but they, never broke away from the British Empire, but that was their goal. Well, that's what they claimed anyway. But yeah, I mean, that's so obvious. That's an obvious example. I mean, we could talk about other examples. Selma, 1965, another good example. But anyway, yeah, but it seems pointless. These people are millionaires and still betting when it's enough is enough. Yeah, but they don't get enough. That's the thing. The old saying, the appetite grows with the eating. You say a person's 300 pounds, like why does he want to eat more? He's always hungry. They're finishing their meal and they say, what are we going to eat for supper? That's the next thing they're thinking of, what to eat next. Yeah, they shot at the British troops. Well, now you got the Liberal government, the Labour Party government, and they're always like kowtowing to the pressure, probably by design. They're like, we're going to have an inquiry and find out who's really guilty of this terrible thing. They got some guy, 78, 9 years old. We're going to put him on trial. He was 29 at the time, or 26. And then they found him not guilty because, like the judge says, it's not really any evidence that they did anything maliciously. I mean, they were reckless, perhaps they were reckless. That's what the judge said. It seemed like maybe things were not right, but to convict, no, I can't do that. So anyway, but it's easy, that whole thing is easy to set up. You start the riot, then you're up in a building, you take some shots at the soldiers, and then you're going to get what you want. Yeah, they shot at the British troops. I'm thankful in Canada, the Celtic people and the Germanic people get along. I know it's not always like that in the British Islands. Yeah. The whole thing is a joke because I think people are uncomfortable studying history, but they shouldn't be. But in 1914, and I'm no fan of the British Empire, as you probably noticed by watching this channel, but I do call it as I see it, or as it exists. And in 1914, the British were about to give Ireland home rule. That was the whole thing. Well, okay, let them rule themselves. We're sick of these people, really. Why do we ever take them over? That was really the attitude. Why did we ever take this place? This is like a nightmare. It's like our oldest. They even say that on their website today, like now. If you look on the website today, it says Ireland is England's oldest colony. And they say, but they call it a province today. They don't use the word colony. It doesn't sound right. They say province, but by 1914 they were saying, why did we ever take this place? Can somebody explain this to us? Because it's a total nightmare. We don't even want it, really. So they were going to give it home rule. That was the bill, home rule bill. But then World War I broke out. That's another conspiracy, but another problem. But anyway, so the First World War broke out, and they were like, well, we can't do it now. They told the Irish, we can't do it now because it's too much happening. But when it's over, we'll do it. You'll have your own country. We don't care. You can rule yourself, have your own parliament, pass whatever laws you want. We don't care. But the IRA was like, oh no, that would cause us to not have control. And that's what we want, control. And so that's when they staged that Easter uprising. You know, we're going to rise up and get our freedom from people who are trying to give us our freedom. That makes sense. And it's so comical in a morbid way. You know, when you read about it, they're going to rise up to free Ireland, but they go and shoot people that weren't even involved in it. Like people walking down the street get shot in the head that were like maybe pro-independence. Oh, well, that just happens sometimes to other people's family, not mine. My family is important. These other people don't matter. That's how they think about it. So anyway, yeah, not worth the hassle. So they say, so then the whole thing was a total fiasco it was a fiasco that had no reason to be a fiasco is what I'm trying to say. It's like if somebody's going to give you something, you don't have to steal it because they're about to give it to you, right? Like, why would you take the time and effort to steal something that the person is planning to give to you for free or with, some little strings attached, but not too many. And that's probably why Michael Collins was murdered, because he was saying, well, basically getting what we want, aren't we? Okay, but you're right. If Ireland was free, the IRA wouldn't have power. The Irish government would, right? Yeah, it was the whole thing. It's like, well, how are we going to have power if they're giving it away? So we got to start this killing spree and and we have to frame it like it's a big struggle, Same thing in the United States. You see that kind of stuff happening, But over the years in history, but anyway, there wasn't much to say about these two products. They're both nice. They both are very high quality, but ultimately, I would just save the money. I would just buy whatever's cheap because I'm not seeing much difference between the two. So I'm gonna give the win to the silver, not because it's better. No, it wins because it's cheaper, number one, and it doesn't taste any worse. So a penny saved is a penny earned, as Benjamin Franklin said. Anyway, it's good talking to you. I'm gonna make my breakfast. Have a nice day, Ron. You too, Joe. Nice day to you. I had some bacon and some grits with onions and jalapeno peppers and cheese. Brie. The cheese was brie, and it was from France, not French style, actually from France. All right, bye-bye, everybody.